Welcome to Seek Your Challenge Daily Reading with She the Seeker Ministries, where we equip women to sit at the feet of Jesus. We are so excited about this Seeker Challenge as we invite you to allow the Lord's Word to illuminate your heart. So right now, I invite you to open your Bibles or simply listen, and I pray that He speaks to you through His Word. Here's today's reading.
Today's reading comes from Ezekiel chapters 40 through 42, being read from the Christian Standard Bible. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month in the 14th year, after Jerusalem had been captured on that very day, the Lord's hand was on me, and He brought me there. In visions of God, He took me to the land of Israel and set me down on a very high mountain. On its southern slope was a structure resembling a city. He brought me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze, with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. He was standing by the city gate. He spoke to me, "Son of man, look with your eyes, listen with your ears, and pay attention to everything I am going to show you, for you have been brought here so that I might show it to you. Report everything you see to the house of Israel." Now there was a wall surrounding the outside of the temple. The measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 units of 21 inches. Each unit was the standard length plus 3 inches. He measured the thickness of the wall structure. It was 10.5 feet, and its height was the same. Then he came to the gate that faced east and climbed its steps. He measured the threshold of the gate. It was 10.5 feet deep. One threshold was 10.5 feet deep. Each recess was 10.5 feet long and 10.5 feet deep, and there was a space of 8 3/4 feet between the recesses. The inner threshold of the gate on the temple side next to the gate's portico was 10.5 feet. Next, he measured the gate's portico. It was 14 feet, and its jambs were 3.5 feet. The gate's portico was on the temple side. There were 3 recesses on each side of the east gate, each with the same measurements, and the jambs on either side also had the same measurements. Then he measured the width of the gate's entrance. It was 17.5 feet, while the width of the gate was 22 3/4 feet. There was a barrier of 21 inches in front of the recesses on both sides, and the recesses on each side were 10.5 feet square. Then he measured the gate from the roof of one recess to the roof of the opposite one. The distance was 43 3/4 feet. The openings of the recesses faced each other. Next, he measured the porch, 105 feet. The distance from the front of the gate at the entrance to the front of the gate's portico on the inside was 87.5 feet. The recesses and their jambs had beveled windows all around the inside of the gates. The porticos also had windows all around on the inside. Each jamb was decorated with palm trees. Then he brought me into the outer court, and there were chambers and a paved surface laid out all around the court. 30 chambers faced the pavement, which flanked the courtyard's gates and corresponded to the length of the gates. This was the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance from the front of the lower gate to the exterior front of the inner court. It was 175 feet. This was the east next to the north, as described. He measured the gate of the outer court facing north, both its length and width. Its 3 recesses on each side, its jambs, and its portico, and the same measurements as the first gate. It is 7.5 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. Its windows, portico, and palm trees had the same measurement as those at the gate that faced east. 7 steps led up to the gate, and its portico was ahead of them. The inner court had a gate facing the north gate like the one on the east. He measured the distance from gate to gate. It was 175 feet. He brought me to the south side, and there was also a gate on the south. He measured its jambs and portico. They had the same measurements as the others. Both the gate and its portico had windows all around, like the other windows. It was 87.5 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. Its stairway had 7 steps, and its portico was ahead of them. It had palm trees on its shams, one on each side. The inner court had a gate on the south. He measured from gate to gate to the south. It was 175 feet. Then he brought me to the inner court through the south gate. When he measured the south gate, it had the same measurements as the others. Its recesses, jambs, and portico had the same measurement as the others. Both it and its portico had windows all around. It was 87.5 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. There were porticos all around, 43 3/4 feet long and 8 3/4 feet wide. Its portico faced the outer court, and its jambs were decorated with palm trees. Its stairway had 8 steps. Then he brought me to the inner court of the east side, and he measured the gate. It had the same measurement as the others. Its recesses, jambs, and portico had windows all around. It was 87.5 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. Its portico faced the other court, and its jambs were decorated with palm trees at each side. Its stairway had 8 steps. Then he brought me to the north side. When he measured it, it had the same measurements as the others, as did its recesses, jambs, and portico. It also had windows all around. It was 87 1/4 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. Its portico faced the other court, and its jambs were decorated with palm trees on each side. Its stairway had 8 steps. There was a chamber whose door opened into the gate's portico. The burnt offering was to be washed there. Inside the gate's portico there were 2 tables on each side, on which to slaughter the burnt offering, sin offering, and guilt offering. Outside, as one approaches the entrance of the north gate, there were 2 tables on one side and 2 more tables on the other side of the gate's portico. So there were 4 tables inside the gate and 4 outside, 8 tables in all which the slaughtering was to be done. There were also 4 tables of cut stone for the burnt offering, each 31.5 inches long, 31.5 inches wide, and 21 inches high. The utensils used to slaughter the burnt offerings and other sacrifices were placed on them. There were 3-inch hooks fastened all around the inside of the room, and the flesh of the offering was to be laid on the tables. Outside the inner gate within the inner court there were chambers for the singers, one beside the north gate facing north, and another beside the south gate facing north. Then the man said to me, "This chamber that faces south is for the priest who keeps charge of the temple. The chamber that faces north is for the priest who keep charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, the ones from the sons of Levi, who have approached the Lord to serve him." Next he measured the court. It was square, 175 feet long and 175 feet wide. The altar was in front of the temple. Then he brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the jambs of the portico. They were 8 3/4 feet thick on each side. The width of the gate was 24.5 feet, and the side walls of the gate were 5 1/4 feet wide on each side. The portico was 35 feet across, 21 feet deep, and 10 steps led to it. There were pillars by the jambs, one on each side. Chapter 41. Next he brought me into the great hall and measured the jambs on each side. The width of the jambs was 10.5 feet. The width of the entrance was 17.5 feet, and the side walls on the entrance were 8 3/4 feet wide on each side. He also measured the length of the great wall, 70 feet, and the width, 35 feet. He went inside the next room and measured the jambs and the entrance. They were 3.5 feet wide. The entrance was 10.5 feet wide, and the width of the entrance's side walls on each side was 12 1/4 feet. He then measured the length of the room adjacent to the great hall, 35 feet, and the width 35 feet. He said to me, "This is the most holy place." Then he measured the wall of the temple. It was 10.5 feet thick. The width on the side rooms all around the temple was 7 feet. The side rooms were arranged one above another in 3 stories of 30 rooms each. There were ledges on the wall of the temple all around to serve as supports for the side rooms, so that the supports would not be in the temple wall itself. The side rooms surrounding the temple widened at each successive story, while the structure surrounding the temple went by the stages. This was the reason for the temple's broadness as it rose, and so one would go up from the lowest story to the highest by means of the middle one. I saw that the temple had a raised platform surrounding it. This foundation for the side rooms was 10.5 feet high. The thickness of the outer wall of the side rooms was 8 3/4 feet. The free space between the side rooms of the temple and the outer chambers was 35 feet wide all around the temple. The side rooms opened into the free space, one entrance toward the north, another to the south. The area of free space was 8 3/4 feet wide all around. Now the building that faced the temple yard toward the west was 122.5 feet wide. The wall of the building was 8 3/4 feet thick on all sides, and the building's length was 157.5 feet. Then the man measured the temple. It was 175 feet long. In addition, the temple yard and the building, including its walls, were 175 feet long. The width of the front of the temple, along with the temple yard to the east, was 175 feet. Next, he measured the length of the building facing the temple yard to the west. With its galleries on each side, it was 175 feet. The interior of the great hall and the porticos of the court, the thresholds, the beveled windows, and the balconies all around, with their 3 levels opposite the threshold, were overlaid with wood on all sides. They were paneled from the ground to the windows, but the windows were covered, reaching to the top of their entrance and as far as the inner temple and on the outside. On every wall all around, on the inside and outside, was a pair carved with cherubim and palm trees. There was a palm tree between each pair of cherubim. Each cherub had 2 faces, a human face turned toward the palm tree on one side, and a lion's face turned toward it on the other. They were carved throughout the temple on all sides. Cherubim and palm trees were carved from the ground to the top of the entrance and on the wall of the great hall. The doorposts of the great hall were square, and the front of the sanctuary had the same appearance. The altar was made of wood, 5 1/4 feet high and 3.5 feet long. It had corners, and its length and sides were of wood. The man told me, "This is a table that stands before the Lord." The great hall and the sanctuary each had a double door, and each of the doors had swinging panels. There were 2 panels for one door and 2 for the other. Cherubim and palm trees were carved on the doors of the great hall, like those carved on the walls. There was a wooden canopy outside in front of the portico. There were beveled windows and palm trees on both sides, on the side walls of the portico and side rooms of the temple and the canopies. Chapter 42. Then the man led me out of the way of the north gate into the outer court. He brought me to the group of chambers outside the temple yard opposite the building to the north. Along the length of the chambers, which was 175 feet, there was an entrance on the north. The width was 87.5 feet. Opposite the 35-foot space belonged to the inner court, and opposite the paved surface belonged to the outer court. The structure rose gallery by gallery in 3 tiers. In front of the chambers was a walkway toward the inside, 17.5 feet wide and 170 feet long, and their entrances were on the north. The upper chambers were narrower because the galleries took away more space from them than from the lower and middle stories of the building. But they were arranged in 3 stories and had no pillars like the pillars of the courts. Therefore the upper chambers were set back from the ground more than the lower and middle stories. A wall on the outside ran in front of the chambers parallel to them toward the outer court. It was 87.5 feet long, for the chambers of the outer court were 87.5 feet long, while those facing the great hall were 170 feet long. At the base of these chambers there was an entryway on the east side as one enters them from the outer court. In the thickness of the wall of the court toward the south, There were chambers facing the temple yard in the western building, with the passageway in front of them, just like the chambers that faced north. The length and width, as well as all their exits, measurements, and entrances were identical. The entrance of the beginning of the passageway, the way in front of the corresponding wall as one enters on each side, was similar to the entrance of the chambers that were on the south side. Then the man said to me, the northern and southern chambers that face the courtyard are the holy chambers, where the priests who approach the Lord will eat the most holy offerings. There they will deposit the most holy offerings, the grain offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings, for the place is holy. Once the priests have entered, they are not to go out from the holy area to the outer court until they have removed the clothes they minister in, for those are holy. They are to put on other clothes before they approach the public area. When he finished measuring inside the temple complex, he led me out by way of the gate that faced east and measured all around the complex. He measured the east side with a measuring rod. It was 875 feet by the measuring rod. He measured the north side. It was 875 feet by the measuring rod. He measured the south side. It was 875 feet by the measuring rod. Then he turned to the west side and measured 875 feet by the measuring rod. He measured the temple complex on all four sides. It had a wall all around it, 875 feet long, 875 feet wide, to separate the holy from the common.
Let's reflect on these questions together as we discover what the Holy Spirit may be saying through His Word. Number 1, what words, phrases, or things stood out to you? Number 2, what did you notice about God's character, His love, or His ways? And number 3, is there something you currently believe about God, yourself, or others that needs to change based on the truth you heard? I invite you to check out the Bible reading plan through the link. And then remember, until next time, keep sitting at the feet of Jesus and join us as we stay connected to Him together.